Hello, I am Dawn Westmoreland, hailing from Asheville, North Carolina, the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, coming from WPVM FM 103.7, the voice of Asheville. My show is called The Empowered Whistleblower. We blow the whistle on how we can have better workplaces. And when I say better workplaces, we're not just talking about companies, brick and stone. We're also talking about people who work for themselves, entrepreneurs. So my show airs every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone, or anytime any of the other 200 Pacifica Network radio stations in the U.S., Canada, and the Virgin Islands can pick it up. I am so delighted. My friend Felix Nater is back on the show again. He is a world international expert on workplace violence prevention. Hi, Felix. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on when you're listening in.
Good morning, Dawn. How are you this morning? It's always a pleasure to be on your program.
Thank you. I jump for joy because I've known you a while and you are a wealth of knowledge, many, many years. We're going to talk about that. And you just put out a book.
Yes.
So I want to get a background of you. I don't think I can capture everything that you've done. I mean, I always remember that you work for the Postal Service. You've been interviewed on CNN by Wolf Blitzer. Can you fill in the audience your background? Because I think it's so important, your credibility.
Yes, most fortunate, Dawn. As the United States Postal Inspector, we were responsible for safety, security, and criminal activities perpetuated against the Postal Service. And over the years, one of the areas of concern, if you were following workplace violence during those years, 1986 was a day of infamy, a tragic day for the Postal Service, where Patrick Sherrill, a disgruntled letter carrier, came into the workplace at Edmonton, Oklahoma, and killed and wounded 20 of his coworkers. It was the shot heard around the Postal Service world. I was the public information officer at the time when the call came in. So you can imagine the confusion and the state of emotion and the unpreparedness. And I learned from all that. I was in the middle processing all of this information. I was not an investigating agent. I was just someone that was assigned to interface with the media. Years later, this is 1986, years later, 1992, I'm in the field. Again, wanting to get close to my wife, I returned back to the New York division. And they asked me if I wanted to be part of this workplace violence prevention unit. And I said, no, I like cops and robbers. But what I found out, Dawn, was that I had all the skills. After 18 years, the Postal Inspection Service had prepared me to deal with this difficult assignment because it was all about troubleshooting. It was all about critical thinking, critical analysis. Truly, an ounce of prevention was really a pound of cure. And in that relationships, I worked with unions. I worked with local shop stewards, supervisors, postmasters, district managers, executives of the Postal Service, and I testified at all levels of the civil and criminal justice systems in support of the cases that I was involved in.
Yes.
Retired September 11th, and here I am. Been doing it for 20 years.
I'd like to acknowledge your military time because that's also so very important. And I appreciate your service sacrifices to our country.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Now, fast forward, you have a book that you were told to put out. And I know over the years I've said, hey, when is your book coming out, Felix? Because I want to be one of the first to get this book. Well, you talk about the name of the book.
Here's my book. Here's my book. Finally, the name of the book is Combating Workplace Violence, Creating and Maintaining Safe Work Environments, a practical approach. And you know who came up with the idea that I should write a book? Two professionals in the behavioral industry community from Arizona, two doctors, one a professor, Arizona State, and another one a professional consultant in behavioral science. They approached me and said, Mr. Nater, you are a refreshing addition to this world. Please consider joining us here on the West Coast, and we'll open up an office called Nater Associates West Coast. So David Van Fleet, Ella Van Fleet were my guiding resources for the development of this project.
Well, I have to commend them for getting after you to do a book, because we've all been waiting for your book.
Thank
Now,
you.
I know I've interviewed a lot of other people that consider themselves to be workplace prevention consultants and such, and not to judge any one of them, but they have different tactics that, for example, the school system, let's arm the school with guns. That's the way they think it is to go. But I know you have a different view on that.
Yeah, yeah. If you think about this,
Mhm.
you hire someone and you put them to work, and you give your child to a school system, and you expect that the school system is going to take care of them like an employer would take care of their employee, not expecting that that child would come to school with problems. Nevertheless, there's a responsibility on the school system to adequately understand that those issues will affect people and their needs and their problems. And merely brushing them off and not giving them the adequate attention that they need is a warning sign of problems to come. A warning sign that you've created by dismissing the person's need for attention and giving them all the time in the world by suspending them to think about how they feel about you. So when we look at school and workplace violence, those are human dimension factors perpetuated by good people with good intentions.
Yes, I understand that. So what would somebody get out of reading your book, Felix?
I'm sorry?
What would somebody get out of reading your book?
An understanding that our approach to school violence or workplace violence involves a human element to it, that we must sit back and analyze and evaluate what's in front of us, not be prejudgmental. It's a go-through process of how to rather than what to, how to and why to rather than what to. It's easy to do something, but understanding why you're doing something and how to do something are equally important. So mine is a practical guide. David and Ella said, put something together that will give people excitement about wanting to follow through because now they understand.
You know what? Let's go ahead, because I want a couple times to make sure we tell people during this interview, where can they find your book? Where can they purchase it?
Right now, it's available on all of the online services, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all the others.
Mhm.
It's also available through the publisher. So you don't have to do much hard work in trying to find it. Just go on Amazon and there it is. Matter of fact, our youngest daughter called on Sunday to say, "Hey, Dad, you're on Amazon." So it's a lot earlier than we had anticipated.
Yes, and a huge big congratulations, because getting a book out there is something that is easier to do today than it has been years ago. But putting something out there that really empowers people, that's powerful.
Well, I hope that people see it that way, Dawn. This was not an easy process for me. I didn't want to write a book. I felt doing and giving of my time and services should have done it, but apparently a book was necessary. Would I have been able to write a book 20 years ago? No way. In fact, I questioned why people would write a book 20 years ago when they didn't have the experience and the expertise, nor the lessons learned to share. So I feel very comfortable today talking about it because I have the experiences to share.
Yes, you do.
And the book is full of experiences.
Yes, yes. Now, I remember sharing this with you years back, not too many years back. I was in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, and it was, I think, 5,000 different counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and they had a breakout about Sandy Hook and all the different school shootings. And the question came up is, what can we do about all this? And so many of the psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors said, we have no clue. What do you have to say to that?
We've come a long way since Sandy Hook. We really have. But I will tell you this, it's still about basics. I wrote a blog several years ago following Sandy Hook, and a young man was sitting at the dining table. This is a story that was told to me by his father, a former police officer and current security director. And he let his son read my blog. And you know what his son said to his father? And he put him on the phone. Mr. Nater keeps it very practical. Why do we have to run back to our classrooms when there's a front door or a side door that we can exit from? right? It's practical things. So those poor people, as cold-blooded as it sounded at the time, got shot in the back, running back to their classrooms.
Mm.
I mean, we still do that kind of stuff, but I think they've opened up their thinking and they don't want to constrain or restrict movement. So I believe that they're also encouraging the kids to evacuate the school. I say evacuate, escape, and then engage if you have to engage as the last resort. So my teaching is around escape, evacuate, and then engage.
Mm-hmm. Do you think putting guns in the workplace or in the school system is the answer for protection?
I am opposed to it. You know, I'm a firearms instructor. I was on the range when a law enforcement officer of 20 years, ready on the right, ready on the light, on the left. The firing line is all clear, engaging live targets, and shoots himself through the knee.
Oh, no.
So if professionals do this, what do you expect? We saw that in Texas. We saw police officers responding to situations where they were armed, and we expect to arm our teachers and our staff who maybe go to the range maybe once a quarter. Of course, they can go as often as they want, but do we want to put that kind of burden and responsibility on the shoulders of teachers and staff? I don't think so. I think law enforcement or security staff that's assigned to the school or the premises should shoulder that burden and that responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember going right before COVID, the Asheville Citizen Police Academy, and it was like, I think 12 weeks or something like that. And they talked about what the police's role, the police officers' roles were. And they were talking about in a state of panic when you have to shoot, even the police officers, their hands are shaking, that nobody can be 100% calm when you're trying to shoot somebody or shoot at somebody.
It is a disaster awaiting to happen, Dawn. It's a civil litigation disaster awaiting, not to mention the loss of life that's going to ensue. So you train me as a teacher, you train me as a staff, and the gun goes off and kills another teacher or staff member or student. How do you explain that? You're not going to convince a jury that as a civilian that you had the skill sets, supposed skill sets of a law enforcement officer. It's a disaster waiting to happen. It may sound good and it may empower the teacher or the staff member, but if you point a gun at someone who knows how to take that gun away from you, they're going to take it away from you.
Yeah. Now, I think it was in the past year we had a female shooter in the school system, which just blew my mind because so many of us think it's always a male out there doing the shooting. What's changing in our society?
Anger. I think COVID-19 and all the associated behaviors, negative behaviors that came out of during that period of time has, on a negative side, empowered people to speak their minds. People who normally were willing to take the abuse are no longer taking the abuse. And as I said last August, what are you going to do? You're going to fire and suspend everybody just because they speak up? Because that's the new world that we're in. We're in a defiant world where politically I can say whatever is on my mind, racially and ethically, and whatever the case may be. You can't restrain me anymore. And if you try to restrain me and don't help me, you're going to suffer the consequences. So what we're seeing now, we're seeing females who have been the brunt and victims of abuse for years, standing up and saying, it may not be the right approach, but this is my solution. This is all that I have left.
Wow. That kind of seems like, the person who decides to do suicide, they think that's the only way to go, I guess.
And there's a lot of professionals out here who understand that. And they feel that way, Dawn, because the system is not on their side. The system seems to financially take away programs that are suited to help them. The system seems to target these people as being the problem and not the solution. Then they internalize these concerns that they have, and they have targets on their chest. They're the bad ones. So they're in between a rock and a hard place trying to figure out, how do I solve this? And meanwhile, these professionals that are out there offering their services are being chopped off at the ankles because funding is being withdrawn or curtailed or reduced.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about this many times. We never think it's going to happen, right?
That's right.
I mean, I know my mom had cancer 3.5 years ago. Never thought we'd have cancer in the family, and it happened,
That's
and we
right.
had to deal with it. I imagine a lot of company owners, the school system, school board, they think it's never going to happen to my small company or my small school.
First and foremost, I say something that most people associate with a political statement: lock them up. If you're the school superintendent or a CEO of a company and you're not personally leading issues that deal with the human behavior, then you're being negligent. You've got to be proactive. You've got to set the standard: superintendent, CEO, executive director. You've got to be on top of the game. As a matter of fact, just a quick tidbit. I once presented at a public housing administrators annual conference, and I was approached by several executive directors who had a feeling and a mindset that I truly, truly enjoyed. They believed that it was their responsibility to ensure that when their employees came through their doors, that every aspect of their engagement was as safe as possible. And they appreciated me referring it to a personalized attention that safety and security should be all about. So I think it's the CEO's responsibility, the superintendent's responsibility, and the executive director's responsibilities in all organizations to be personally accountable for what goes on in your workplace. You should demand to know the data and stop worrying about somebody else's data.
Let's talk about surveillance, Felix. This is something that I believe that you think is very important in the workplace, while some people say, no, I don't want to be, videotaped all day long. Let's talk about surveillance. Is it a way to help reduce, the problems that are going on, or to catch the bad guy or girl who's out there doing bad things?
Technology is a great solution. And technology with the right integrator can provide incredible resources and services to the procurer. It can't be the decision of the procurer. It has to be a collaborative effort between the integrator, if you would, the company that is selling the technology, and educating the vendor, the procurer, to understand the utility of the technology. Can it help? Yes. But remember, when people decide to do what they want to do, they justify and rationalize their actions. There's nothing you can do when you've forced that person to cross the line of civility, and they're going to do what they're going to do. We saw that in the Washington Naval Shipyard shooting. He was shown and seen on the video surveillance cameras going throughout the hallways and offices and shooting people. So it's not going to stop someone. As a matter of fact, it might empower someone to go beyond it, because they'll think they're on television and they're going to get exactly what they're looking for: instantaneous fame before they kill themselves. So yes, it has a prevention value to it, but we also have to educate people, and those responsible for the education have to provide the resources, and those responsible for discipline have to not be so quick to discipline without first finding out the root cause or the contributing factors that, oh, by the way, could be a creation and manifestation of your lack of leadership or your lack of sensitivity. So we've got to give both sides of the equation an opportunity to resolve itself.
Yes. Now, I have a background in HR, as you know, now going on over 31 years. Does the HR person play a role in safety in the workplace?
They play a significant role, Dawn. In the Army, we have a term: proponent, proponent agency. They have proponent responsibilities for workplace violence. They own the policy. But you can't blame them completely, because we throw them out there and we say, you own the policy, and then we write policies, plans, and procedures that sit on someone's internet, but we don't understand that they lack the mindset to appreciate how to do this and why, and not the what of the behavior. And so these poor people who really want to do a great job are afraid of doing it because they don't have the resources within their organizations to support them. Right. So they don't necessarily bury the need to get things done. It's just that they don't know how to be proactive in handling it, and then knowing what to do next. And we're quick to blame them when we should be blaming the organization who fails to recognize they're limited on what they can do without a collaborative effort.
Wow. When you talk about collaboration, who all's involved in having a safer workplace?
It starts with the senior level leadership, the C-suite, the executive directors, in identifying the need for a policy that clearly identifies and other supporting policies, budgeting the training, budgeting the allocation and procurement of resources that are needed, and certainly listening to those that are involved. HR from the proponent perspective. If you have security from the security standpoint, in organizations, safety oftentimes takes on the role of safety and security. They're involved. Medical units are involved. Legal is involved. Facilities are involved. Everybody plays a significant role. And if I may, by this example, if you want to buy surveillance technology, Mr. or Miss Security Director, don't do it alone. Integrate the resources within your organization, collaborate amongst them, and coordinate the effort. Here's what you can derive from a $10 million procurement. If you have 10 executive directors and they all have $1 million budget, and your desire is of buying a $10 million capability by yourself, here's the benefit. Facility, $1 million from you will allow you from home, open up your laptop and verify that your people are doing their jobs just from surveillance technology. Medical, a customer who comes in and trips and falls, you, by virtue of your surveillance technology, can now flip over the laptop and verify the lie. HR, people who you claim are piggybacking or leaving work early and bypassing the systems, you can now verify through surveillance technology who's doing what. And you bolster your evidence and your ability to go after people with modified evidence. So there's a value to collaboration that can even offset and impact procurements of significant value. So it's part of my consulting process. How do we work together as teams through that integration of resources and collaboration of effort?
Felix, for the company that's small and doesn't have the money, is there some minimum procedures that they can accomplish to lessen, to mitigate any chance of a shooter coming in or somebody trying to harm their employees?
I think if I were the CEO of a small company that had 10 or more employees, that I would be an advantage point as opposed to the larger or mid-sized company that has to go through all of these layers to effectuate policy. I think they're in a very good position because they know their people. I think the difficulty is that the vendors don't go to these small businesses and educate them because it's not worth the investment. But if you're the leader of a small organization, you should be proactive in demanding to know from the community what's available, what resources are available, what should I be doing, what can I do with my limited resources, and how do I avail myself of the technologies and systems that are out there to ensure that I can minimize risk to my workforce. When you have a mom and pop operation, the downside of that is that you don't believe you have a problem. And the second downside is you believe you can take care of your own problems. And they're both wrong positions to take.
Yeah. I mean, it just amazes me, Felix. It's so widespread. Years ago, I was stationed at Tinker Air Force Base, not, far from Edmonton, Oklahoma. I'm thinking, my gosh, that's less than 45 minutes away. I worked in DC. I've been at the shipyards, and it's just all over. What is your ideal client who wants to have a better workplace, a safer, healthier workplace?
My ideal clients are manufacturing, processing, and production organizations, and of late, utility organizations. When you think about them, they're spread out. They have diverse operations. They create diverse opportunities for their homegrown workforce. They have unique situations that require customization in getting the information. Online training for a manufacturing operation may not be conducive because not all the employees have access to computer systems or laptops. So you'd have to create a unique environment. Utility folks are involved with customers every single minute of their working day, and they encounter unique situations that require customized approach to their awareness, situational awareness, and training. And the way they promote from within, they are unique because they give the career employee the benefit of the opportunities for growth and development. And they're supportive. So why not give them the skill sets that align with their leadership roles and responsibilities to allow them to see a bigger picture in providing for safety and security? And one client has done that. One client has actually taken our advice, and he has implemented supervisor-led safety and security training every single day before the employees go out on their shifts. They talk about what happened yesterday, and they talk about how they can reduce risk today.
Have you seen where the employees have actually sued because the company wasn't safe, Felix?
Yes,
Very
common. Whether you provide security guard services or whether you're a negligent employer, yes, more and more juries are not, what's the word I want to use, accommodating to employers who take the witness stand, and this is how they testify. Humana, 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 humana. They say absolutely nothing other than just defend their failed programs. Because I look at an active shooter in a school environment, particularly, and in a workplace environment, as a failed workplace violence prevention program. Because prevention starts with, what is that person's problem, and why aren't we addressing that problem? And until you answer those two questions, and there's an eventual shooting, you own, Mr. Employer, Mr. Superintendent, Miss Superintendent, that problem that resulted in that shooting.
One thing I know about you, Felix, and I've known this for years, you're a very gracious person. You're always acknowledging other people and their talents, their skills, their goodness. Is there anyone that you want to recognize, remember at this time?
I think the content that's in this book, I think my philosophies and my mindsets have been cultivated by the likes of Peter Langman, Dr. Steven Soroka, Dr. Ken Trumpman, Michael Dorn, Chris Vaughn, Paul Alina, Jim DeMayo. I mean, these people have noticed what I was doing or were doing and offered advice and feedback. Or they authored something of value that I would then mull over and decide how it can be integrated into my thinking. Associations like IAPSC, International Association of Professional Security Consultants, the Institute of Management Consultants, the International Association of Health and Safety Security. Those are three organizations that have molded me, shaped me, and got me to a point where I feel damn good about myself and what I do. And damn the torpedoes, I'm going full steam ahead.
Awesome. And kudos to all those people. We thank you. You know, like I said, I've been in HR a long time. You know, I'm retired from the Air Force, and I know the importance of your work, Felix. And
Thank you.
as you say, you know, it's not just you, it's all these other people that are collaborating with you so you can get out there and help other people. Let's touch back on your book again. I'd like you to tell the audience, the listeners, where can they purchase your book? What is the name of your book? And just quickly, what can they get out of that book, please?
Okay, so you can purchase Combating Workplace Violence, Creating and Maintaining Safe Work Environments at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or any other organization where you typically order online publications from. I think it's a practical guide. I am the dumbest guy when it comes to the educational level of most of them that are out there. But you know what God has blessed me with? Wisdom and common sense. And I try to convey information in the simplest of forms, and then you can judge my vernacular or my presentation or my informality, however you want. But it's a valuable book that will go with you wherever you go. I was told by someone who read it that it belongs in every college and every MBA course should get a copy of this so that they can understand that it's about leadership. It's about leadership. And I thank all of those that have been a part of my life, letting me stand on their shoulders all these years to see a broader spectrum of life.
I'm so glad you mentioned that about colleges and MBA. Is there anybody out there that's going to make that happen? Surely somebody's going to make that happen.
Thank you. I'm sure of that. I think the person who picks up this book and says, boy, he's talking to me. I had no idea that it entailed such little thought as long as you were committed and it had the investment to move forward with it. And that's what I want to do. We wanted to put together something that the non-security and the non-professional in the security community could easily follow with little effort.
Felix, this has been a great interview. I always love talking to you, seeing you. You're such a gracious person, always giving, always mentoring. All the best to you. Thank you for being on the show. And I'd like to wrap up and say that, you know, I wrote a workbook a few years ago, How to Stand Up to Workplace Bullying and Discrimination. And Felix, you also gave me some statements, which I, you know, also tie back to you. So thank you. You are your wealth of goodness, breath of fresh air, and
Thank you.
just a cyclopedia of expertise.
Well, we try. Thank you for having me on your show.
Howard. Follow Felix Nater. That's Felix Nater, and stay empowered.
You bet. Thank you very much, Dawn.